I've always loved to explore the area around my house. I lived in the country and always felt safe exploring the forests, as they were always my favorite place. One day, I was exploring the forest around, and also with my best friend. We heard the sounds of children playing, and so we followed the noise. We found a very small playground. It had a few swings, a slide, and even a sandbox. The whole thing was kind of off-putting because it was kind of tucked away in the woods, kind of like carved out in a clearing. It didn't really make a lot of sense, but there was also a group of these small children, wearing long skirts and strange outfits. There were no adults around. We didn't understand why these kids were dressed like this. We both thought it was very strange. We had never seen anything like it. So when I got home, I got on the computer later on, and I found this random article about a skinwalker. Basically, a skinwalker is a malevolent witch in Navajo culture. They can shapeshift into any animal, and when they turn back, they are wearing the skin of the animal they turned into. Well, you might be asking, what does all of this have to do with the children that you saw in the woods? Well, the article said that skinwalkers can take the form of a child. I had a thought that these must be skinwalkers. I tried to tell my parents, but they didn't believe me. I understand that claim is far-fetched. I even tried to tell my friends, but they thought me and my buddy were making up stories. I didn't understand why none of them believed me. I thought they would think I was telling the truth. I didn't understand how they could believe I was making up stories, or why they were calling me crazy. So, the next day, I decided to go back to that playground to see if I can find any proof that these children were actually skinwalkers or shapeshifters of any kind. I decided to take along a digital camera to take pictures of them. I wanted to be able to prove that they were indeed skinwalkers. I'm sure listening to this or reading this, you might think I'm very weird for suspecting these random group of kids in the middle of the woods in this creepy playground to be skinwalkers. But I'm telling you, if you saw them, saw what they were wearing, it wasn't right. It was incredibly creepy. I was sure that they were skinwalkers, and I was going to capture it on film. I took along my blanket to also use as camouflage. My intent was to sneak up on them while they were playing. I wanted to take a picture of them transforming. So I walked deep into the forest until I found that same playground. Before I even got to it, I could hear them playing. When I got to the playground, I hid underneath my blanket, and I saw the children playing, just like before. They were in the weird skirts and outfits, just like the day before too. You gotta understand, the whole thing was so weird and creepy. So I took some pictures, but I didn't see any of them turn into animals or anything. I was disappointed. I had hoped to get pictures of them transforming. Then, I could have shown them to my parents, and they would have believed me. So, I decided to just go home and look at the pictures. I had a feeling that there was something wrong with them, but I didn't know what. I couldn't see anything on the pictures, and when I got home and went into my bedroom, I was looking at some of the pictures when I heard the window open. I looked up and saw a strange man looking at me. He was wearing a black hood, and his face was covered with a black, strange mask. I screamed, and he darted away. So I ran out of my room, running into my parents' room. I told them that there was a man just outside my house. They looked at me like I was crazy, and told me to go back. They didn't believe me. Can you believe it? I was really mad at them for not believing me. I told them it was a man in a black hood, and they honestly just blew me off. I can't believe it. Their son was in danger, and they were just so quick to write me off like they did. I was so mad that I grabbed my blanket and decided to go outside. I wanted to see if the man was still there, and so I walked outside my house and looked around. I didn't see anything, but I did see a figure a figure in the shadows, so I ran back into the house and locked the door. I felt like I was never going to be safe again, and now I was really scared. I wanted my parents to protect me. My only guess is that these skinwalkers, who had taken the form of these children, must have somehow been alerted to me, and now knew where I lived, so one of them must have taken the form of this man with the mask. God only knows what was going to happen. Things calmed down for a few days afterwards, after not seeing the creepy man, and not going back to that even more strange and freaky playground. But then one night, while taking out the trash, this is where I believe I saw the Skinwalker creature in full. I was taking out the trash late at night, and I saw some of the children from the playground. There were 3 of them, and they were wearing their weird outfits. I was shocked to see them. I took a step back and watched them from behind the tree. I always saw how they were dressed in long skirts and dresses, and I had never seen a child dressed this way. I mean, they were really pale and acted robotic, with white eyes. This was like some Children of the Corn type stuff. They approached me without blinking and began speaking this strange, demonic ancient language I had never heard of before in my life. I was so scared. I had no idea what they were even saying. So I began running back towards the house when I remember everything around me became almost like a dreamlike state. I could nearly feel myself coming in and out of reality. It's very hard to explain, but I did lose consciousness at some point, and I do remember these children standing over my body, speaking in that weird language. They did speak a few words in English, though. One of them I remember was ritual, and the other sacrifice. Then I blacked out. My next memory is of waking up in the hospital. My parents were there and they were worried. They told me that I had been found out in the driveway after not coming back in the house. They called 911 and I was taken in. They couldn't find anything wrong with me directly, but I can't help but think I've somehow been marked by these shapeshifter Skinwalker children. I don't know what to do, and now I'm scared. I don't know if I was actually taken by these creatures in disguise or if I'm going completely insane. I just don't know what to do. I have a feeling that since I was the only person who ever witnessed this, they want to sacrifice and kill me and replace me with a doppelganger. I'm reaching out to you for help. What can I do to protect myself from these things? They seem pure evil, and I know they are not what they seem. I don't know if this will actually be posted, if you even read this far. I've been trying to get this off my chest, and no one believes me. I don't know what to do. If you know anything that can help me, please, let me know. I'm desperate. Please, help me. I've only ever been on the Navajo reservation once in my lifetime, and it was for a very tumultuous week vacation with my family on my mother's side. See, my mother is full Navajo, and my dad is German. She's a total hippie, and he's a total manly man kind of guy. I think for me, I'm on the 50-50 split with my personality. I have a bit hippie traits myself, and am also a bit manly man at times. My mother is very much enriched in her cultural traditions and rituals, while my father is not. After I was born, we had since moved away long ago, but did go back about 6 years ago for a week when all this happened that I'm about to tell you. My story involves dealing with something I never knew existed until this trip: skinwalkers. Now, I'm going to explain what they are to the best of my ability, and you can decide if I'm crazy or not. I mean, sure, I could be, but I am a bit crazy after all. But this story, I have witnesses who are still alive. My mom. I was 16 years old at the time, and our plan was to stay on my mother's parents' trailer near the edge of the reservation for a week. Due to our upbringing, which I won't exactly get into, we didn't have a great or close relationship with my mom's side of the family. Yeah, we would visit on the phone. We had no problems with that. I do, however, have a problem with it now, but that's a different story for a different time. So, we're at my mom's parents' house, in a trailer, and my grandmother has a bunch of these strange native wards all over the wall. My relationship with my grandmother is healthier than my grandfather, so I was asking her, what are these for? And she explained it's for protection against evil spirits. I figured it was just a bunch of hocus pocus, and I was like, cool, whatever. I'm going on a walk. I need some fresh air. My grandmother, however, is a bit more into this than I thought. As I was walking away, she told me to be careful and not go too far because she feels like something bad might happen. I had been stuck in that trailer for too long, and I felt like I was kind of suffocating. Because of where we were at, there wasn't a whole lot of places or really much to walk around. It was kind of just out in the middle of nowhere. So, I made the best of it. I looped around the trailer out in the middle of nowhere, going up this semi-large rocky hill, just a little ways away from the trailer, but still within eye distance. This way, I could get a better view of my surroundings. I did find something weird, though, that disturbed me. I found a dead coyote with a wooden stake driven through its chest. I'm from Arizona originally, and there are coyotes all over the place out here. But this wasn't that strange. What made me suspicious was the fact that someone had clearly managed to kill a coyote by driving a stake through its heart. As much as that bothered me, I tried not to dwell on it too much, and maybe it was just some psycho out here at night with nothing better to do than to sacrifice animals. It's not like I had anything to worry about, after all. It was only in the afternoon, completely light out, so I felt safe. As I'm standing up here, though, I feel this weird sensation come over me. It was like a chill, but it was felt internally. Then, coming from all around me, I hear sounds like whispers or somebody talking, except it sounded like a bunch of people talking all at once. This had me a little freaked out, so I decided to just go back to the trailer. I had had enough of being outside for the time being. I go back to the trailer and was just watching TV with my grandparents when my grandfather decides to go out for a smoke with his tobacco pipe. As he's walking out, my grandmother, her whole demeanor changed and she gets a very bad feeling. She tells me to make sure he doesn't go anywhere and that he not go too far. So I'm like, okay. So now I go outside and follow him. Now, remember how I said I was 16 at the time? I should be in good enough shape to follow a 70-year-old man, right? Well, even though I was active and in good shape, I was still just a kid. So I'm walking behind him, and I'm so far behind him because I can't keep up with his fast pace. Faster than any 70-year-old should be able to walk. And what I'm not understanding is why he is walking all the way out here in the middle of nowhere just to have a little smoke, and why he wouldn't just stand off a few feet from the trailer. It all didn't make any sense. So here I am, struggling to keep up with him. I'm not very happy about this. He's either delusional or was doing something. I mean, he is my grandfather and all, but we had a very strange relationship. He was never very social, never talked much. So I'm struggling to keep up with him, and I finally catch up to him, and he's standing there, just looking at something. I'm not sure what he's looking at first, but then I see it. The land kind of dipped down before I could see what he was seeing, and had to catch up to him. There's a coyote. He's looking at a coyote. I'm looking at him, and then this coyote looks at me. Then, the coyote starts walking toward me, but it does this by first standing up on two legs and walks. At this point, I'm scared. I try to tell my grandfather to run, but he doesn't seem very concerned. He's just standing there, looking at this coyote walking toward us casually. I'm getting more and more scared as this thing approaches closer and closer. Not whether to run myself or watch what was about to happen. The coyote keeps walking toward us, and now he's only about 5 feet away. I'm freaking out and trying to think of a way to get this thing away, but I can't. So this thing just stops and looks intently at my grandfather, starts speaking this deep guttural voice that I've never heard before. It kind of sounded like a demon. Then, in complete shock, my grandfather casually responds to this thing in the same language, with a very similar unnatural voice that clearly wasn't his. It's like he was possessed. What was I witnessing? I was so terrified I ran back to the trailer. I was baffled and confused and scared crapless, to be honest. I did not see my grandfather for the rest of the day, and to be honest, I was kind of glad. I was in a bit of a state of shock. I told my grandmother what I had just seen in a complete panic. What is it? What did he say? I told her they spoke this language I did not understand, and she tells me this. What you saw was evil. They tried to kill your grandfather shortly after you were born. They are very powerful. They're also very dangerous. And then told me that's the main reason why they tried so hard to keep a distant relationship, to keep these things away from my mother and I. She still acted very strange about the whole thing, like she was keeping secrets from me and not telling me all the details. This is not how anyone would normally act after seeing their own grandparent speak in a possessed voice to a walking upright coyote, who also spoke in that same voice. I didn't know what was going on, but after a little bit of information, she kind of just shut down. She explained that a Skinwalker is an evil shapeshifter who can transform into any animal they want. It uses its abilities to harm others for its own benefit. Usually, these abilities are used for killing, or for whatever reason, as long as it's personal gain. They're also used to steal things. They can be used to harm livestock. Anything. She explained to me that what I saw was a Skinwalker entity. She didn't use the actual words Skinwalker, though. She called it what they do in Navajo, but told me to be very careful about repeating that specific word, because it draws them in. So I locked myself in the room the rest of the day and night, unsure of what I'm supposed to expect now that everybody was acting weird, and I totally saw something that made no sense. It's like the X-Files in real life. I was even terrified to stay here. The next day, I wake up, and my grandfather was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. I looked at him. He looked at me. We looked at each other for what felt like an eternity. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know anything what to say. So I looked at him. He looks at me. I just got the feeling he was not in his right mind. He was not the same person I remember. I didn't know it at the time, but I was going to soon learn something that would change everything. He told me in a very firm tone to come sit. I did the whole cliche gulp, and I did. I sat down across from him. He looks me straight in the face and says, I had to do something I regret doing in order to save my family. I know you don't understand, and I don't expect you to. I'm warning you now. Stay away from me before danger starts coming your way. I didn't say anything at first, and maybe after a minute or two of silence, I told him I didn't understand what he was talking about. So, without going into too much detail, he explains that he has powers that far transcend what I could ever imagine, but they come at a cost. He explains it to me that so I don't get hurt, I should keep distance. He was very sincere in his tone and warning me for my own good. Honestly, after that, I was done. I just locked myself in the room the rest of the trip. terrified to even come out because, first the coyote thing, then seeing a walking coyote, and now my grandfather telling me he has powers? What was I, in Alice in Wonderland here? The end of the trip comes, and I keep in my mind that my grandmother is still acting super sketchy. My mom's being weird too. It's like everybody is somehow in on this big, weird conspiracy that I don't know about. Well, the night right before we have to leave, it still remains weird and uneventful, at least until now. This night, things were different. I was sitting watching TV in my room and decided I needed to go stand out on the front porch and get some much-needed fresh air. I had been cooped up for far too long in this room, just trying to stay hidden away from everybody and everything. As soon as I stepped outside to try and mentally process this week, it was about midnight, I think a little after. Both my grandparents were asleep. I'm usually a night owl anyway, so I quietly moved through the house and stepped out onto the porch. Out here on the res, you can see the stars at night, and boy is it beautiful. We're out in the country, so there are no city lights to block out stars. But this night was different. I was facing the front yard, standing on the porch. The stars were very bright. I was standing there, just kind of taking it all in. Then suddenly, I felt a presence around me, but I didn't hear anything. I could just sense that somehow I wasn't alone. Have you ever felt this before? Like you can just feel someone or something is around you, but you can't see them. I didn't get the impression of malice or anything. It was just a presence. I turned around, looking left, then right. Nothing. So, confused, I was a little shaken up that there was nobody there. I walked back into the house, stopped, and looked off beyond the light of the porch, and I could have sworn I saw some shape moving quickly around the house, towards the back. I was a little scared, but I'm thinking, this whole week has really affected my mentality. That's probably what it is. So, I get back into my room, turn the TV off, deciding I just need a good night of sleep. Well, I'm laying there, trying to shut my brain off and go to sleep, and I notice that the feeling comes back. So I lay there for a minute and decided to turn my light on. As I'm getting up, I notice there's something or someone just outside my window. I see a shape moving, and so I look out my window into the night. Now, I need to explain something real quick. The moon was out this night, but my bedroom is on the back side of the house, where the moon was visible and faintly lighting and illuminating things outside. Towards the front of the house, where I was originally out on the porch, you could not see the moon because it was on the back side of the trailer at this time. So I'm looking, and my eyes are adjusting more and more to this shape that I'm seeing kind of drunkenly stagger back and forth. And then I see it. It's a very large coyote. I'm staring out the window, trying to process this, and then, out of nowhere, these orange yellowish eyes appear, and this thing starts wandering slowly towards my window. It was maybe no more than 20 feet from my window when I first saw it. I could not tell if it was just standing there or what it was doing, but it definitely noticed me. At this point, I'm incredibly frightened, covered in goosebumps. I turn and run out of the bedroom, and I go hide in the living room. I'm sitting there, shaking, trying to calm myself and go through what I was seeing. I'm thinking that there's no way this is real. So I convince myself to get up and start looking out the windows in the living room. This time, I realize there really is something moving out there. I have to look closely because I can't really tell what it is, at least now. I move over towards the other window, looking out, and I see that whatever this thing is, it doesn't have any color. It's just all black. And I see those yellow eyes again. Then this thing continues to move towards the window, but now it's out where I am, by the living room. It's following me all around the house. I'm frozen in place. I'm not moving. I'm not making a sound. I shut the blinds and I just start to pray as hard and as loud as I can, not caring if I wake anybody up. This goes on for 10 minutes, and I don't know why I do this, but I just had a feeling to go to the back door, open it slowly and step outside. I'm still praying out loud, and I'm not seeing this thing anywhere. I feel like I can't leave the house, so I go back in and close the door, locking it. I grabbed a pillow from the couch and decided I was going to sleep right there on the floor next to the couch, so I was kind of hidden. I somehow managed to pass out once enough adrenaline had worn off. The next morning, I'm awoken by my grandmother, wondering why I was on the living room floor. I told her exactly what had happened last night. She did not say anything, but she had a very, very troubled look on her face. Like, deep down she knew something. She kind of just wrote it off and was like, okay, go get cleaned up now. Now, fast forward to the afternoon, and we say our goodbyes. It's still very awkward and weird, at least around my grandfather, so I only say goodbye to my grandmother. We're driving back to town and we get a phone call from my grandmother, not even 15 minutes down the road, telling us that my grandfather's having a heart attack. My mom immediately burst into tears. She's scared and turns around. Oh, and to clarify, 911 was already called, and so then she called us. Just in case you're wondering why she did not call them first. She did. So we turn around, get back to their house. And that's the moment when I knew my grandfather did not make it. They had pronounced him dead and could not revive him. We pull up just as they're officially pronouncing him dead. You know, the next few hours after were kind of a blur of time for me. Emotions and seeing my grandmother and mother grieve like I have never seen before. Sometime that evening, my grandmother opened up and told me everything. Everything we had experienced while out there. Everything I had seen, felt, and heard. My grandfather was responsible. Yes, he was a Skinwalker. She expressed that I know it's hard to believe. I know it's hard to wrap your head around. But she swears on her life that she was telling me the truth. And that's all I know. My grandmother told me that it's not something you just become. That my grandfather somehow got wrapped up in black magic long before in secrecy and had to let it remain a secret. She explained to me the coyote I saw the night before and the day I followed my grandfather was actually a demon disguised as an animal. They, my grandfather and this demon, allowed me to witness this because I was going to be the next target. Hence why this thing came after me, trying to get into the house. But I began praying. They wanted to take my body. My grandfather knew this and didn't want anything to happen, so he kept his distance. I know it still probably doesn't make sense that he would allow me to see him talking to this evil spirit, and I'm not quite sure why either. Maybe it was to ward me away. That's my guess. I still have questions too. We left that evening back to town. My grandmother moved shortly after my grandfather's death to a different part of the res in a different trailer. I'm not exactly sure where though, but I do know that there was a lot of tension between my grandmother and my mother afterwards. And now that 6 years have gone by, I don't really talk to her anymore. She's kind of gone MIA. My mother doesn't even really talk about her anymore either. The whole thing is weird. Anyway, I know this has been a very long story, and I don't know if it makes any sense or not. I felt the need to share it with you because, even with me being a Christian, I feel like I owe it to somebody out there to let them know this stuff really does happen. It's not a hoax or a joke. I'm not saying ghosts or demons are out to get you guys, but I'm just saying that sometimes things that happen are so out of the ordinary, it's just hard to ignore. Anyway, I guess that's all I have to say. Apologies again for it being long. I know it's kind of all over the place. I just wanted to tell this story. I didn't know where else to put it. If you have any questions, you can email me back. Thank you for allowing me to tell this. I was hunting out in the Alaskan bush once, where I encountered a being I've never encountered before. It was this gaunt, skeletal, bipedal figure with a deer-like skull for a head. It had a long tail and was covered in fur. It was like something out of a nightmare. I could swear that it was actually staring at me, like it saw me. Although I never saw any eyes, ever. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I could not get it out of my head. The sighting happened when I came to a small creek, following a lesser-known game trail. I was not expecting to find anything, and was very surprised when I saw this animal. It was standing in front of a small fallen tree, and was staring at me. It didn't take off and run away like any normal animal would. Instead, it just stood there, looking at me. The creature was so out of place. I didn't know what to think. At first, I was convinced it was just a hallucination, the result of consecutive bad nights of sleep, but I knew it couldn't have been. I just knew this experience was real. I don't think it was a Sasquatch. They are usually 7 feet tall, and it was about 5 feet tall. I don't think it was a bear either. The legs were too long, the torso too thin. It didn't have a face like a bear, and its body was covered in mangy-like skin and fur. I can't explain the skeleton and gaunt appearance. I couldn't tell if this was some sort of native-like head covering, or if this was actually part of the head. It was so weird. I also could not tell if it was a male or female, or even if it was remotely human. Hands down, the strangest thing I've ever seen. It was like looking into the eyes of a predator. So, I very slowly backed away, and it continued to just stand perfectly still, like a statue, never moving. Not even 30 minutes goes by, and now, I'm at least 2 miles away from that location, going back down the game trail I came, and that's when I start hearing voices, coming from all random points in the woods around me. It was my own voice, but distorted and sounding like it was muffled. Then, I began hearing voices of people I knew, or who I grew up with. Impossible for them to be all the way out here. Things were escalating very quickly, and I was now becoming fearful for what was happening. I was hearing my own voice from all around me, hearing voices of those I knew. I was hearing whispers, too, hearing voices in my head, hearing things that weren't there. It was all too much. I could not deal with what was going on. I had to get out of here. I continued to walk, and as I did, I came to a very small creek I had to cross. So I walked along a thin tree line on one side, about to cross over to the other side of the creek. I could still hear my own voice coming from every direction, and I heard what sounded like a woman screaming in the distance. This was scary. I can't explain how terrifying it was. Then, I pass over the creek and realize I have that feeling again. That bad feeling I got earlier, right when I saw that thing originally. I began looking around me, but did not see it anywhere. So I kept walking, and I started hearing more voices coming from the point where I was earlier, when I first saw it. Now, with it all being too much, I just start running. I ran and ran until I made it back to my hunting blind. I just stayed there for the rest of the day until the noises and voices ceased, which they did eventually. Something I did not notice right away, at least until I got back to my hunting blind, is all the noises of the forest were silent. I've never heard a single animal make a sound. Even the creek that was near where I saw the creature was completely silent. It was like the whole forest had gone silent. It was very unsettling. I've never heard it so quiet before. It was the quietest I have ever heard the woods. And I'll tell you what, I am still clueless about trying to explain everything that I saw, heard, and felt. I was out with my family, gathering firewood in the woods by a small mountain creek. It was about 8 a.m., and it was very cold, like it would be in the beginning of winter. It was in the middle of nowhere, and we're the only people there. The sun was just coming up, and we had been walking for about a mile when we noticed a figure about 100 feet away from us in the woods. It was dark and skinny, and it looked like a human, but it was hunched over and seemed like it was sniffing the ground or something. As we get closer, it began running away, but it ran in a weird way, like it was on all fours, and it was quick, but it moved awkwardly, like its joints were in place or something. Anyway, we got to where it was, and it was now gone, so we noticed a couple of things. First was that there was this very off-putting smell. I mean, it was a really bad smell, like if you took a bunch of roadkill sitting out all day in the hot sun. It stank bad. Second, there was this random pile of branches about 3 feet away from where it was, and there was blood all over these branches in a pile. It was pretty disturbing. It looked like somebody had bled out all over, or maybe slit the throat of an animal over these branches. It made no sense. The whole thing was freaky. We were also staying in a camper this time, and so later on that night, as we're getting ready for bed and it's dark out, we hear strange noises coming from the woods, the same spot we saw the weird thing earlier in the day, and it sounded like a lot of screaming and strange gargling noises, and twigs and leaves snapping and breaking. We freaked out. We checked outside and saw nothing. There was no wind that night, and the woods were exceptionally quiet, except for these noises. When it was morning time, we went out in the woods to see if we can find anything. We looked around and we found these strange prints indented in the soft soil around the trees we saw the previous morning. Also, the smell was gone, and that pile of branches with blood on them was now gone too. Nobody had moved it. These prints were also very strange. They kind of looked like hooves, but they did have toe indents in them, and they were deep. They were not bear tracks, though. I know what those look like. They were definitely not human either. So we followed the tracks, and it went about a quarter mile deeper into the woods. Then we hit a small creek. There was no way the tracks went across the creek, so we were spooked at that point. Then we hear the strange noises again, and that causes us to run back to the camper. The next day, we drove out of there and have not been back to that spot. Now, I'm not sure what we saw or heard, but I want nothing to do with it, if we're honest.